The first thing that struck me was the silence. It was nothing like the silence of deep space, the cold, indifferent quiet that wrapped around the ship during our months-long journey here. This was different. This silence was heavy, oppressive, something alive. It settled over me as soon as we touched down on Enceladus, pressing in from all sides like a shroud pulled tight over our small research station buried beneath the ice. The mission brief had prepared us for isolation, the months of intense solitude in one of the harshest environments known to humanity. But nothing could prepare us for the silence here. It was all-consuming, the kind of silence that feels more like presence than absence, as if the ice itself was listening, waiting. Enceladus was a world of desolation. Outside the station's reinforced windows, all I could see was endless ice, stark and alien, shifting under Saturn's faint, distant glow. The station was a small haven of humanity, a few sterile rooms, bunk beds, labs, and a single narrow corridor leading to the airlock and the network of tunnels we'd cut to reach the ocean beneath the ice. It was utilitarian, devoid of warmth or comfort, designed solely to keep us alive. We had been sent to investigate the possibility of microbial life in the hidden ocean below. Years ago, unmanned probes detected signs of simple organisms, the plumes of water shooting through cracks in Enceladus' ice, faint traces of life clinging to the bodies in those towering geysers. They said there was nothing complex down there, nothing dangerous. But as the station settled into the ice, I could feel the first prickle of unease scratching at my mind. Maybe it was the oppressive quiet. Maybe it was the endless miles of ice pressing down on us, or maybe it was just nerves. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were intruding on something vast and ancient, something beyond our understanding. Our team was small, just 5 of us, each with a critical role. Anderson was our geologist here to map the icy layers and study the seismic activity of the moon. Reyes was the tech engineer, keeping our fragile life support systems running in this hostile environment. Chen was the team leader, and under normal circumstances, his calm demeanor would have been reassuring. But even he seemed quieter than usual, his eyes darting to the shadows as if he too sensed something lurking just beyond the reach of our lights. And then there was me, the biologist. I was here for the very thing that had drawn us across billions of miles of empty space. Life. I should have felt excitement. This was the mission of a lifetime, an opportunity to uncover answers to questions humanity had asked for centuries. But all I felt was a deep, inexplicable dread. Our first descent into the tunnels was tense. The walls of ice were slick and alive with refracted light, strange patterns twisting in frozen formations that resembled veins, or maybe nerve fibers, running deep beneath the surface. Anderson mumbled something about natural formations, but even he sounded uncertain. With each step deeper into the ice, the dread grew heavier, as if the weight of the entire moon was pressing down on us. The silence became tangible, filling every crevice, stifling every breath. And with that silence came a feeling that I couldn't shake, a sense that we weren't alone. The thought was ridiculous, of course. Enceladus was as lifeless as it was desolate. But as we ventured farther, small details began to gnaw at the edges of my mind. Faint marks appeared on the ice walls, curving grooves that seemed unnatural, almost organic, twisted. Forming under the moon's intense gravitational pull. But these weren't random. These grooves formed patterns, spirals that looped back on themselves like trails left by something that had passed through long ago. We should have reported it, turned back maybe. But instead we continued down, drawn by the allure of discovery, the thrill of venturing where no human had ever been before. And for a moment, as we reached the first cavity opening into the ocean below, the dread lifted, replaced by a flicker of awe. We'd arrived at the edge of the subsurface ocean. The water was thick and dark, illuminated by the glow of our lights reflecting off crystalline structures jutting from the ice like massive frozen spires. It was beautiful and terrifying, a hidden world that defied everything we knew. As we stared into the inky depths, I couldn't help but feel a strange pull, as though something below was calling, drawing us deeper. I tried to shake the feeling. I told myself it was just the thrill of discovery. But as we set up equipment, preparing for our first samples, the shadows seemed to lengthen, stretching across the icy floor like fingers reaching for us. And as I lowered a probe into the water, the silence grew even deeper, almost like a breath held in anticipation. That night I lay in my bunk, the hum of machinery lulling me into a restless sleep. But I dreamt of eyes watching from below, of figures shifting in the water, drifting just out of reach. When I jolted awake, I was drenched in sweat, heart pounding as though I'd been running. In the quiet darkness of the station, the weight of the ice around us felt suffocating, pressing in on all sides. Then, just as I drifted back to sleep, I heard something. A low, rhythmic hum, faint but unmistakable, reverberating through the walls. It sounded almost like a heartbeat, slow, patient, and steady. That was impossible. The descent into Enceladus' dark ocean felt like slipping into a silent, submerged nightmare. Every inch of our surroundings felt hostile and unnatural, a deep, alien blackness swallowing the weak beams of our lights. We floated through the icy cavern, the weight of the ocean above pressing down on us like a physical force. The faint hum from the night before was still there, echoing faintly in my ears, almost as if it had embedded itself within me, a haunting remnant of whatever pulsed beneath the ice. And then we saw them. Suspended in the dark water, drifting just outside the perimeter of our lights, translucent shapes shimmered like pale phantoms. At first, they appeared fragile, almost delicate, their forms twisting and undulating slowly, like ribbons caught in a gentle current. They were beautiful and strange, unlike anything I'd imagined we'd find down here. They floated just beyond reach, moving with a purpose that defied logic, hovering in the black water, like sentinels keeping watch. Are they alive? Anderson's voice crackled through the comms, breathy with awe, but his question hung unanswered. None of us could look away. I reached out with a gloved hand, feeling a pull I couldn't explain, a compulsion to connect, to touch. The creature closest to me responded, its faintly glowing form elongating, drifting closer until it was inches from my hand. Its translucent body was almost transparent, a tangle of threads and filaments visible within its core, like a nervous system without flesh. I could see it quiver, as though sensing my presence. And then, as if sensing my intrusion, it withdrew, slipping back into the shadows in one fluid motion, disappearing into the blackness as if it had never been there at all. The others tried to capture images, to run scans, but our equipment struggled to keep up. The signals scrambled, distorted. Every reading came back in garbled lines, each image blurred beyond recognition, like the creatures were distorting our very perception of them. Chen's frustration echoed over the comms as he recalibrated the sensors, but deep down I could sense his unease matching my own. These weren't the microbes we'd come to find. This was something aware. When we returned to the station, I couldn't shake the encounter. My mind kept returning to the moment when I'd almost touched it, how the water around it had felt warmer, how a low vibration had pulsed through me, almost like a heartbeat. I tried to tell myself it was my imagination, that the isolation and pressure were playing tricks on my senses. But even as I lay in my bunk that night, I could feel it. That warmth, that hum, resonating somewhere deep within me, a presence lingering just below the surface. That night, sleep didn't come. I lay staring at the steel ceiling, every creak of the station amplified in the silence. And then, just as I was drifting, I heard something. A soft, scraping sound echoing through the corridors. I sat up, heart pounding, and strained to listen, but the sound faded away, leaving only the oppressive silence. The next day, I returned to the lab, determined to find an explanation for the strange creatures and the unsettling sensations they left behind. I examined the water samples we'd collected, expecting to see traces of basic life forms, perhaps the microbial life we'd expected to find here. Instead, I found something else. Under the microscope, the cells pulsed with an unnatural vitality, shifting and morphing, almost as if they were watching me, aware of my intrusion. They weren't static, as most cells would be under these conditions. They seemed to react, reshaping themselves in response to my observation. I watched in horrified fascination as one of the cells divided, not into identical copies as most cells would, but into something new, something alien. I knew immediately that these cells weren't just life forms, they were evolving, adapting, and they were doing it faster than anything I'd ever seen. Our following dive was tense. We said nothing as we descended into the frigid darkness, each of us focused on the monitors, the instruments, anything to distract from the silent horror that awaited us below. The translucent beings were still there, drifting around us like ghosts. They moved with a strange rhythm now, a slow, pulsating dance that seemed almost ritualistic, each movement drawing them closer, then pulling them away, as if luring us in. I noticed something new that time, small black threads trailing from their bodies, tendrils that coiled and writhed in the water like reaching fingers. They twisted in the currents, glinting in the faint light of our headlamps, stretching toward us as if in search of contact. I felt a presence, a strange tug in the center of my chest, pulling me toward them, deeper into the water. I shook myself free of the trance, fighting the urge to reach out again, but then as I withdrew, I felt it, the warmth from before, a faint pulsing heat seeping into my fingers as if something had reached out to me. And suddenly, I wasn't in control. My vision blurred, my hands moving as though they belonged to someone else. I felt myself reaching out, fingers grazing the water where the creature floated. The warmth surged up my arm, spreading through my body like a slow burn. A hum filled my head, drowning out every thought, every sound, as the creature drew closer, its form shifting and blurring in the water. Then, without warning, it recoiled, and the warmth vanished, leaving a chilling emptiness in its place. My hand dropped, numb and tingling, and I stumbled back, gasping for air as the creature disappeared into the depths. The others didn't notice. They were too engrossed in their own observations, eyes fixed on their screens, unaware of the shadows twisting around them, stretching across the ocean floor like fingers reaching up to pull us down. That night, as I lay alone in the bunk, a dull ache throbbed through my arm, spreading into my shoulder. I examined my hand under the sterile lab lights and saw something that made my blood run cold. Beneath the skin, dark veins had begun to spread, thin lines tracing up my arm, pulsing with the faint, rhythmic beat I'd felt before. In that moment, I understood the truth. The creature hadn't just touched me, it had left something behind. The cold dread sank deeper as I realized I couldn't tell the others. This wasn't just a strange discovery, it was a contamination, an infection. And it was in me, crawling beneath my skin, spreading the each heartbeat. I lay in the dark, feeling the rhythmic pulse grow stronger, resonating through my body in time with the hum from the depths. It felt like a heartbeat, alien and ancient, merging with my own, as though I was becoming part of whatever lurked below. And as sleep finally overtook me, one thought echoed through my mind, a realization too horrifying to voice. It was no longer just watching us, it was waiting. The silence in the station was no longer just unsettling, it was suffocating, pressing against us like the weight of the ocean above. Each creak of the walls, each flicker of the lights felt like a warning. Something had changed, though none of us could say what. The air was thick with tension, and every glance, every word, carried an undercurrent of fear we all silently agreed to ignore. But I could feel it in my bones. We weren't just discovering something on Enceladus. We had awakened something. It began subtly, in ways easy enough to dismiss at first. The power flickered on and off without explanation, equipment failed seemingly at random, and Reyes, the tech engineer who'd never once slipped up, swore she could hear static-filled whispers coming through the comms. She laughed it off afterward, but the laugh was hollow, forced, her eyes darting to the corners as if expecting something to be lurking there. Anderson was the first to act strangely. It was subtle at first, a moment of staring blankly at the ice walls in the lab, eyes glazed, lips moving in faint, inaudible whispers. At one point, I caught him running his hands over the ice, fingertips tracing the organic grooves like they were sacred lines on some ancient, forbidden map. "Anderson," I called, my voice cutting through the silence, sharper than I intended. He didn't react at first, but then he blinked and turned to me, eyes wide and unfocused, as though he hadn't heard me approach. "What? What were you doing?" For a long moment, he said nothing. His gaze flicked back to the ice wall, then to me, a shadow crossing his face. Finally, "Just listen." He ran a hand over his scalp, his fingers trembling. "Can't you hear it?" His voice was a whisper, raw and hollow. "It's like it's calling to us." The hairs on my neck stood on end. I'd felt the same pull, the same thrumming in my bones. But hearing someone else say it aloud made it real, undeniable. I wanted to confront him, to demand more answers. But something stopped me. A quiet dread coiling in my stomach, urging me to keep silent as if some instinct was warning me against understanding too much. Then, things began to spiral. The next morning, we found Anderson's bunk empty. His gear was gone, the airlock was unlocked, and his helmet was missing. Reyes was the first to discover the open airlock, her face pale, fingers trembling as she pointed to it. Did anyone hear him leave?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. None of us had. The alarms should have gone off, our comms should have buzzed. But there was nothing. He was simply gone, vanished without a trace. Chen, our leader, tried to keep us grounded. He might have gone out to gather samples, he suggested, but even he didn't sound convinced. In his eyes, I saw the same fear lurking just beneath the surface, like a shadow cast in too bright light. As we searched the station, an eerie feeling settled over me, a sense that we were being watched. Each step, each turn felt like we were intruding in a place we didn't belong. Shadows shifted at the edge of our vision, and the silence seemed to hum with anticipation, as though it was holding its breath, waiting for us to make a mistake. The worst part was that part of me didn't want to find Anderson. I'd seen the change in his eyes, the way he'd looked at the ice as if it held secrets. He was only beginning to understand. If he was out there, somewhere in the dark, part of me feared what we'd find, or worse, what we wouldn't. Back in the lab, I examined the samples of the strange translucent organisms we'd gathered. They shifted under the microscope, twisting and reshaping themselves like something actively resisting observation. I watched, transfixed, as the cells morphed and divided, splitting into new, distorted forms that looked almost familiar. Too many limbs, eyes that seemed to form and disappear within seconds, tendrils twisting like roots reaching out. My skin began to crawl as I realized something horrific. The cells weren't just alive, they were aware. Every probe, every test I conducted seemed to agitate them, as though my very gaze was enough to disrupt whatever process was unfolding beneath my microscope. And most disturbingly, each time I observed them, I felt that faint warmth in my own skin, a pull toward the glass slide, a buzzing under my fingertips that pulsed in time with the organisms. With mounting dread, I looked down at my hands and saw that the dark veins beneath my skin had spread, twisting up my wrists and creeping toward my elbows. They pulsed faintly, as if responding to the life on the slide. I backed away from the microscope, a wave of nausea washing over me. The realization was as simple as it was horrifying. Whatever was down there, it wasn't confined to the ice. It was in me now, spreading through my veins, entwining itself with my very being. And as the pulse continued, a deep sense of despair settled over me. This wasn't something I could escape or ignore. It was part of me, and with every beat of my heart, I felt it sink deeper, anchoring itself within me like roots into soil. It wasn't long before the others began to show signs as well. Reyes grew restless, her movements jittery, her fingers tapping out an incessant, unnatural rhythm that grated on my nerves. When I asked if she was all right, she turned to me with a distant look, her pupils blown wide, and whispered, "It's beautiful, you know. What's underneath?" She shook her head, almost as if breaking from a trance, and hurried away, muttering to herself. Chen started locking himself in his quarters, emerging only for brief, stilted conversations, his face gaunt, his skin pale. He no longer looked like the man who had been our calm, collected leader. His eyes darted from shadow to shadow, his voice crackled whenever he spoke. He too was muttering things I couldn't understand, phrases that sounded like static and whispers, a language that felt ancient and unfathomable. As the days passed, we all started to unravel, our minds fraying at the edges. Shadows grew darker, longer, stretching across the icy walls like fingers reaching toward us. Each step echoed through the station. Each breath seemed to carry a tremor, a faint vibration that made our bones ache. One night I found myself in the lab staring at the ice wall, entranced by the dark veins that pulsed within it, mirroring the lines crawling up my own skin. They seemed alive, almost breathing, twisting and expanding in rhythmic beats, a heartbeat that wasn't mine but felt inseparable from my own. And then I heard a voice, a low, insidious whisper that resonated from deep within the ice, calling out in a language I didn't understand but felt in my bones. "It's waiting!" It seemed to murmur, words sliding into my mind like oil, thick and cold. "It's so close. We are so close." My fingers brushed against the ice, and a jolt shot through me, a piercing cold that left my fingertips numb and tingling. My pulse thundered in my ears, echoing the voice, merging with it until I could no longer tell where my own thoughts ended and its words began. The awakening. There was no longer any doubt. Whatever was down there wasn't just an organism, it was something ancient, something with purpose and intelligence, something that had been waiting in the darkness beneath the ice for millennia. We hadn't just disturbed it, we had joined it, become part of whatever terrible purpose it harbored. Anderson's disappearance, the infection, the whispers that slid into our minds like venom, all of it pointed to one conclusion, one truth too horrifying to accept but impossible to deny. We were no longer ourselves. We were vessels, conduits, parts of something vast and unspeakable. As I lay in my bunk that night, I heard the hum again, louder this time, closer. It vibrated through my bones, sinking deeper, like roots wrapping around my mind, dragging me down. I could feel it spreading, seeping into my thoughts, filling me with images of vast, twisting structures beneath the ice, shadows that moved with purpose, eyes watching from the darkness, and a hunger so profound it eclipsed all else. I closed my eyes, and in the blackness I saw it, the true face of what lay beneath Enceladus, a thing that defied description, a mass of shifting forms and tendrils, eyes and mouths that opened and closed in silent screams. And I knew as the hum rose to a deafening crescendo that we were already lost. The air in the station had thickened, saturated with an invisible weight, as though the pressure from the ice above had crept inside, pressing down on us, filling our lungs with something heavy, ancient, and suffocating. The others, Reyes, Chen, even myself, were slipping, our minds fraying like fibers under strain, pulling apart thread by thread. The infection, or whatever it was, had rooted itself deep within us, a slow, creeping poison that twisted our thoughts, pulling us closer to the ice, closer to the dark. Anderson was gone. Reyes was barely there, a hollow-eyed shadow, her fingers brushing against the walls as if seeking to feel something beneath the surface. Chen hadn't left his quarters in days, and I could feel it in every cell of my body, a pulsing, a quiet hum that wasn't just in the station anymore. It was inside me. Every beat of my heart felt like an echo, like a call that resonated deep below, in the dark reaches of Enceladus, where something massive and unfathomable waited with open arms. I was beginning to understand what Anderson had meant when he'd whispered, "It's waiting. It's so close now." But it was worse than that. It wasn't just close, it was inside. I could feel it, spreading like dark roots, entangling my thoughts, merging with my very consciousness. I tried to hold on to who I was, to keep some semblance of control, but it was slipping, the infection gnawing away at my identity. A slow erasure as something else moved in to take my place. That night, as I sat alone in the dim light in the lab, I heard it again. The hum. This time it wasn't faint or distant. It was there, all around me, resonating through the walls, the floors, the very air I breathed. It felt like a heartbeat, but larger, deeper, as though the whole moon pulsed with a life of its own. My eyes drifted to the ice wall, the dark veins visible beneath its surface, twisting and pulsating in sync with the hum. I couldn't look away. I felt it calling to me, the presence in the ice, the hunger, ancient and endless, a force that had waited patiently in the depths, concealed beneath miles of frozen silence. And then I saw movement, a shadow gliding just beneath the surface, shifting and writhing as though alive. It was vast, incomprehensible, a darkness that seemed to go on forever, like looking into the maw of something that had no end. And as it moved, I understood. It wasn't just an organism. It wasn't something that could be categorized, measured, or understood. It was something vast, primordial, a consciousness that stretched beyond the limits of our reality, beyond our comprehension. It was something that didn't just exist beneath the ice, but was the ice, the ocean, the very fabric of Enceladus itself. The realization left me numb, cold. This wasn't something we could escape, something we could kill or contain. It had been here long before us, waiting, lying dormant, and we had come to it like moths to a flame, drawn in by our own curiosity, our own arrogance. I was startled from my thoughts by a noise, a soft, shuffling sound. Reyes stood in the doorway, her eyes glassy, skin pale, her movements jerky, almost puppet-like. Her gaze fixed on me, a vacant, haunting stare that sent a chill down my spine. "It's time," she whispered, her voice a hollow echo, devoid of the Reyes I once knew. "It's calling us." I wanted to scream, to tell her to fight it, to resist, but the words died in my throat. Deep down, I knew it was too late. I could feel the pull, the magnetic, insidious tug that had settled into every cell of my body, urging me forward, drawing me deeper, back into the dark. In silence, we walked together, Reyes and I, through the dimly lit corridors, our footsteps echoing like a dirge. As we passed Chen's quarters, he joined us, his face gaunt, eyes hollow. But he didn't resist. None of us did. It was as if we were no longer in control, like our minds had been replaced by a singular purpose, an unyielding urge to descend. We reached the airlock, and with a surreal calm, I pressed the release. Cold air hissed as the doors slid open, and we stepped out onto the frozen surface of Enceladus. The world around us was silent, bathed in the faint, ghostly glow of Saturn looming in the sky. The ice stretched out in every direction, glinting under the pale light, an endless, indifferent landscape that felt more like the edge of an abyss than a place. And then we saw it. A fissure in the ice, narrow and dark, like a wound that had been waiting to be opened. It seemed to go down forever, a black, yawning chasm that felt like it would swallow us whole. The hum was louder now, vibrating through the ground, resonating in my bones, filling my mind with thoughts that weren't my own. Without a word, we moved toward it, compelled by the silent call. I felt the ice crack beneath my feet as I approached the edge, peering down into the fathomless blackness below. For a moment, my mind rebelled, a surge of fear and desperation, a final futile attempt to break free. But the call was too strong, the infection too deep. There was no going back. Reyes went first, her body slipping into the fissure with an eerie calm, vanishing into the darkness without a sound. Chen followed, his face blank, empty, his form swallowed by the void below. And then it was my turn. As I stood on the edge, the hum grew louder, drowning out everything else, until it was all I could hear, all I could feel. My heart beat in time with it, my pulse syncing with the rhythm of that ancient, terrible life lurking in the depths. And as I looked into the darkness, I felt something staring back, a presence vast and lonely, a hunger that stretched across eons, waiting patiently for this moment. With a final breath, I stepped forward, surrendering to the pull, to the darkness, to the thing that had been calling to us since we'd first arrived. I fell, my body sinking into the cold, unyielding embrace of the fissure, the ice walls closing in around me as I descended into the heart of Enceladus. The hum was inside me now, filling me, consuming me, merging with every part of me until I was no longer myself, but part of something far larger, far older. As the darkness closed in, I felt a strange, terrible peace, a sense of belonging, as though I had finally found my place, my purpose. I became part of the hum, part of the silence, part of the endless, patient hunger that lay in wait beneath the ice. And then, all at once, there was nothing. Only the silence of Enceladus, vast and endless, as it had been before us, and as it would be long after we were gone.